Hello, welcome back to my channel and to my BBC Shakespeare retrospective. And today we're going to talk about Twelfth Night and The Tempest. Now, those people who've been following this series so far will know that when I was younger, I didn't much care for the comedies. I wanted the sort of the Sturm and Drang of the tragedies. I wonder if as you get older you appreciate Shakespeare's comedies more, because watching Twelfth Night, I just absolutely fell in love with it. What an incredible piece of work. Extraordinary when you think about it, because apparently, so it says, they commissioned it just for a sort of Twelfth Night entertainment. Apparently it was first previewed on Candlemas, which is the 2nd of February. But it was a sort of Twelfth Night entertainment, and yet it's one of Shakespeare's most perfectly constructed and beautifully written plays. I mean, so many of the great quotes from Shakespeare come from this play, like, "If music be the food of love, play on." And of course, music is a huge part of the play. It flows throughout the whole play, and you notice that the songs get more and more sad and more melancholy as the play goes on. And then there's also, some are born to greatness, some become great, and others have greatness thrust upon them. I didn't realise actually that it came from this play. I'd forgotten that. So many, the language is so beautiful in this play. At points it was moving me to tears actually. So it's a wonderful play. I mean, Twelfth Night doesn't really mean very much in England anymore. It's just the time when you're supposed to take your decorations down, or it's bad luck. I lived in Spain for a year, and in Spain it's actually probably more important and more of a celebration than Christmas itself. They have parades through the streets and they throw sweets to the kids and everyone dresses up and it's a big night. And apparently back in the day in England it was also a big celebration. It was a time of bawdry and wassailing and partying. And, apparently there were things like men used to dress up as women, or the butlers and the servants used to dress up as their masters, and all this sort of thing, sort of topsy-turvying the world that they lived in, which is, of course, is what happens in this play. Men dress up as women, women fall in love with women dressed as men, Malvolio thinks that his mistress is in love with him, etc., etc. But it's not really a chaotic, anarchic play at all. In fact, what's interesting about this play is it's one of those, mature comedies of Shakespeare which is threaded through with genuine sadness and melancholy, and keeps playing on that theme that Shakespeare was obsessed with, of the death of youth. Older people trying to recapture their youth. Toby Belch and his friends are sort of playing like children, where the younger people are starting their lives, finding out who they love with, trying to find out who they are. And it's a very sad theme that keeps coming through in the songs, particularly from Feste the Clown. And also, it's one of these comedies which, it's a bit uneasy, right? So it's a very lovely, fluffy, romantic piece, but it's shot through with real pitch black darkness. There's that scene, for example, where Antonio, who has devoted himself to Sebastian, and then, he goes to the aid of who he thinks is Sebastian, but it's really Viola. And she just says, "I don't know who you are." And he goes into this sort of dark fug, this kind of complete cynicism about mankind, which is really quite strong. Very well played here by the Scottish actor Maurice Revs. And then there's also that extraordinary scene where, having tricked Malvolio, they lock him up as a madman. And there's this uncomfortable sense, which I think is deliberate by Shakespeare, that this joke has gone too far. And we start to see into some real darkness. It's a bit like in Merchant of Venice, where there's this joke played on Shylock, but Shylock's fury and frustration at the system he's trapped in is very, very dark. And if you get a good production like this one, it comes through. There's something a bit too much about what's done to Malvolio. He genuinely starts to lose his wits. And of course, madness, as well as the sort of difference between youth and age, is one of the overriding themes throughout this play. Everyone seems, am I mad? Am I going crazy? What's happening to me? There's different ideas of madness. Love makes us mad. It makes us act in mad ways. There's foolery and knavery. So it's a very brilliant piece of work, and I was very, very impressed by this production. I thought that it was a superb cast, very well directed by John Gorrie. One of the things about these BBC television Shakespeares, which we've forgotten, and which was really good fun for the audiences at the time, was they're stacked full of TV celebrities, right, who most people would not have known were Shakespearean actors or good at Shakespeare, and it was fun to see them play. So in this one, in the middle, playing viola, is Felicity Kendal, who was, of course, famous for the Good Life sitcom. Was a heartthrob of many gentlemen watching the TV at the time, and she's absolutely wonderful as Viola here. She carries the play brilliantly. Of course, she had some, past. She had credentials in Shakespeare. She had appeared in the film Shakespeare Waller, which was based on the experiences of her own family touring India staging Shakespeare productions. So she had some previous. But also you get like Robert Hardy, who at the time was famous in England for being in All Creatures Great and Small, and he plays Toby Belch. Toby Belch is a kind of quasi-Falstaff. You almost expect to reveal that he is Falstaff at some point in the play. And Robert Hardy, who likes to go over the top a bit, is perfect as Toby Belch. Though there's something a bit lacking in this performance. Toby Belch should be one of these great big rotund comic characters that comes out of the screen at you. Robert Hardy gives a somewhat muted Toby Belch. I was a bit surprised by that. I wanted a bit more fulsomeness in the performance. It's just slightly lacking. And then, of course, there's a very young Robert Lindsay. Robert Lindsay at the time was famous for a sitcom called Citizen Smith, Wolfie. And, here, this is before he did, in 1983, he did King Lear. He played Edmund in King Lear, opposite Laurence Olivier, in which he was excellent. And he has a very small part here as Fabian, the other fool. And he's great. And he's, not just the way he speaks the verse, but his reactions to the other characters fills in so much of his character. It's a really great little performance on the side. This is a great play. You know how we were talking about in As You Like It, how Shakespeare gave roles in his comedies for all his different types of fool. So you get the melancholy fool, a bit like Jacques in As You Like It. You get the sort of pratfalling fool, or the camp fool. And each of them has a very, very good role designated for them in this play. So, as well as Robert Hardy, Ronnie Stevens is very good as Andrew Aguecheek. He gives a wonderfully camp, over-the-top performance. It sort of steals the scene a bit from Robert Hardy, I think. But even better is Trevor Peacock, who plays Feste. He plays Feste quite brilliantly. And Feste is the melancholy clown. And he gets that sense across, that sense of a sort of a tiredness of world weariness, as well as the jokes and the singing. And I think actually he's the core of this production. I think he's very, very good. People will best know him, of course, as being the no man from Vicar of Dibley. He's absolutely superb here. And finally, there's the female fool, Olivia's housekeeper, superbly played by Annette Crosby from One Foot in the Grave fame. It's a role that often gets neglected or missed out, but she's really good. She really sells it, plays it with a lot of energy and a lot of fun. But the two other actors we must mention Sinead Cusack as Olivia. She is quite brilliant. And her scenes with Felicity Kendal are absolutely gorgeous. The way they speak the verse, the interaction between them is just perfect. Superb. Really very good. And of course we must mention Alec McCowan. We last saw him as the chorus in Henry V. Here he plays Malvolio, and he plays it to perfection, really. It struck me, Malvolio is a very famous role in Shakespeare. He's not actually on stage very much. But when he's on stage, if you've got a good actor behind it, he really comes forward as an extraordinary character, a sort of more comic Polonius, if you like, from Hamlet. And I think he's superb here. And McCowan really gets across that sense of fury, almost tipping over into madness. Hysteria, then fury of Malvolio at the end of the play. I can't fault this production. I absolutely loved it. It was just a joy to watch. One of my favourites so far in the series. Now we come to The Tempest. Is there any play in the English language which has been so abused by directors as The Tempest? You know what I mean. The Tempest, famously Shakespeare's last complete play, apparently. The one where he gives up his art, he's Prospero giving up his art. And it's all full of magic. It's full of spirits and dance and music. So directors go to town on it, don't they? And they almost always ruin it. They get so far up their own backside that they just destroy the movement of the play. Is this one any different? You see, the first thing about The Tempest is it is a bit of an odd play. I'm not sure that I've ever really liked it that much. It starts off with this very realistic first scene when they're on this ship being tossed around in the ocean. I've always wondered why Shakespeare felt the need for that scene, right? Because the next scene, we go to Prospero and his daughter Miranda, and we have this long, what science fiction fans call info dump, right? Where Prospero tells his daughter the whole story of his life, when he could have mentioned that they could easily have put in that there's some guys over there who've been shipwrecked. You don't need that first scene, anyway. And then you get this kind of bumbling around of these various characters on this island, sort of missing each other and bumping into things and getting messed around by Ariel. And then you get this long, incredibly drawn out and tedious explanation scene at the end where it's all resolved. It's a very strange play, isn't it? In this play, in this production, I think that this production exposes the BBC television Shakespeare more than any other production. Because of this magical, romantic with a capital R nature of the play, and it bumps into the BBC's kind of, film theatre type of approach. So at times, it's a bit like a sort of amdram pantomime. Blokes, in costumes with crowns on their heads and turbans, bumping around these sets. And the way that they represent the spirits is these young, lithe men in loincloths, golden loincloths. So it's a bit like the local Amdram Society has kind of found itself in a Derek Jarman movie. It's a bit of a clash. And there's a rather awkward bit at the end where, where Prospero shows Ferdinand and Miranda. He creates this scene with Juno and Ceres and these goddesses. And the BBC does it in this kind of, it's half opera, half ballet, and it looks really banal. It's really middle class, like, this would be a good representation of magic on the island, It's almost squirm-inducing, It didn't work for me at all. And the strange thing about this production is it gets some things so right and some things so wrong. So the start of the play, this scene on the boat, the BBC go to town on this, and they clearly shot it on sound stages. I think they went to Ealing, that's where they usually went to do this sort of thing. So it's got a sort of location footage reality about it, which is unfortunate because you can't hear a damn word the actors are saying over the water and the rain. So they've spent all this money recreating this ship on a soundstage for nothing, really. And then there's curious bits. All the stuff with the villains, the retinue of the King of Naples and everything, coming onto the island, they seem wandering around these kind of cardboard sets. It's all a bit badly staged. And then right at the end, key moments of drama. The stuff between Ferdinand and Miranda is beautifully handled. It's very moving. But the key moment the most moving moment in the play for me is when Prospero says goodbye to Ariel. Says, you've done it. Now you're free. It's over. I relinquish my power and you are free. And it's almost like a marriage between these two, isn't it? There's almost a relationship between Ariel and Prospero. And it's a relationship that it's both sort of spiritual, but it's also, Ariel is Prospero's art. It's his power. So when he gives away Ariel, he gives away two things at the same time. In this production, David Dixon, in his gold loincloth, just runs off and disappears. There's no sense of this separation. So the BBC have gone to town on some parts of the play, and others, they just leave it dead. I can't understand that. Dramatically, it's very unsatisfying. In terms of the actors, Michael Hordern is very, very good as Prospero. Now, Michael Hordern can be a very fussy, fuss-budget actor, but here he puts his ticks away, And he's got that incredible craggy face, kind of something eternal, Methuselah-like in, which is really good for Prospero. And he's really very, very good in the part. And I think he's matched by Pippa Gard, who's a very lovely Miranda. Incidentally, her cousin, Christopher Gard, plays Ferdinand. Christopher Gard was always playing young hero types throughout the 70s, always getting his chest out. You know, he's in The Go-Between. Joseph Losey's The Go-Between. And they're very lovely together, and they work really well together. Warren Clarke is excellent as Caliban. He looks a bit silly. They made him look like a sort of ape man. But he's a great performer, and he overcomes that. David Dixon is an extraordinarily strange Ariel. Dixon might be familiar to those of you who are Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fans. He's Ford Prefect in the TV series. He gives a very strange performance here, an otherworldly performance. Does it work? I think it's a moot point, but it's an impressive attempt, I think. So they're interesting as the two spirits. But watching this production again made me think that Caliban is never as interesting as many critics and pundits make him out to be. He's a rather dull character, I think. It's also interesting, this production, because it teams up two Yes Minister stars before Yes Minister was even a glint in the screenwriter's eye. So we've got Nigel Hawthorne playing Stefano. Very unusual for Nigel Hawthorne. He's best known as kind of a very sort of royal, regal type. Here he's playing a drunken sailor. And John Nettleton as Gonzalo. John Nettleton is a wonderful actor. He's a bit too sweet and cuddly as Gonzalo in this production, for my taste. But there we are. Watch out also for Andrew Sachs, who is Manuel from Fawlty Towers. You see, again, that would have been interesting for audiences at the time to see Manuel playing in Shakespeare. He's the real drunken fool Trinculo. And he actually says one line, "I said nothing," just like Manuel says in that famous scene in Fawlty Towers. So those are the actors to watch out for. Also, a quick word for Alan Rowe, who is an actor I really like in the role of Sebastian, the dastardly Sebastian. Opposite him, though, is another one of this production's weak points, and that's Derek Godfrey as Antonio. You see, again, this is a crucial part of the drama of the play, is the relationship between Michael Hordern's Prospero and Derek Godfrey's Antonio. They are antagonists. Antonio was the one who forced Prospero out of his dukedom onto the island. And yet, Antonio doesn't really make any impression whatsoever. And when they finally meet, there's no charge, there's no real venom or, sense of, rapprochement or anything between them. And really that should have been there, just as that final farewell between Prospero and Ariel should have been a key moment. So it's a rather muddled production, and yet another production of The Tempest that doesn't satisfy me. I'd be interested to know what you make of it below. I had issues with it. Okay, well next time is Derek Jacobi in Hamlet.